Hi, and welcome to another episode of Gary Talks. You know, I'm a child of the 80s. I grew up watching 80s TV when we had 3 channels and then 4 channels near the end of the 80s. And the staple that I watched every night it was on was sitcoms. So today, I'm going to rank my top 10 sitcoms of the 1980s.
Gary Talks TV. Gary Talks TV. Gary Talks TV.
Before I get to my rankings, I want to go over some of the rules I gave to myself to help come up with this 10. First of all, it had to have a laugh track. That takes away a lot of the shows that were kind of on the border. Was it a comedy? Was it not? It had to be a 30-minute show, and it had to be shot on a studio with 3 cameras. This doesn't really affect a lot in the 80s. It was more in the 2000s that we started having that one-camera, non-laugh track show. But it does affect a show kind of like MASH. So that's one of the reasons why MASH isn't in my top 10 of the 80s. We'll start with my number 10. The guy from Melmac, Alf. I was 11 when Alf first came on NBC, and that was the perfect age to enjoy the antics of the cat-eating Gordon Shumway and the Tanner family.
Somebody broke the Alchemonics window and we're trying to figure out who it was.
Say, it wasn't you, was it, Brian?
No?
Brian, dear, this is very important.
Hey, if the kid said he didn't do it, he didn't do it. Stop with the third degree.
Fine. If you didn't do it, that makes you the prime suspect.
Brian, dear, this is very important. Did you break the window?
It's kind of crazy to think about how popular a show with a puppet as the lead actor was. But Alf was a top 10 show in its second season. Even the unresolved cliffhanger as a series finale doesn't really detract from the show. And don't get me started on the Project Alf movie that came out later. It sucked. Number 9 is a show that, as a guy, I couldn't really admit to watching in the 80s. This was supposed to be a show made for girls, and only girls would like it. But I had a massive crush on Joe, and that was always a reason to watch. The Facts of Life. The Facts of Life was actually a spin-off from Different Strokes, as Mrs. Garrett had been the Drummonds' housekeeper before becoming a house mother at the school. The first season of the show was quite a bit different from the norm, as there were more girls at the school, including a young Molly Ringwald. But season 2 changed the cast to be the 4 we grew to know and love: Tootie, Natalie, Blair, and of course, Joe. In later seasons, after the girls had graduated, they all worked a business together with Mrs. Garrett, and those episodes weren't quite as strong. But all in all, Facts of Life was quintessential 80s fun. Next up is a show that started in the 70s, but I consider it an 80s sitcom classic. It contained one of the big catchphrases of the decade. What you talking about, Willis? Different Strokes.
Now the world don't move to the beat of just one drum. What might be right for you may not be right for some.
In today's world, it seems like a show about a rich white guy adopting 2 young black sons would be an instant lightning rod for controversy. But in the 80s, this was considered social commentary, as it was the first sitcom that I watched regularly that tackled serious issues like racism and drug abuse. But it also never seemed preachy. I know other sitcoms did it first, but not to the eyes of Generation X. I still remember the episode where First Lady Nancy Reagan showed up to talk to Arnold about drugs, and it was huge.
Could we offer you some coffee or some tea?
Or some jelly beans?
The cast famously had all sorts of personal issues after the show was over, which also led to a small black cloud over the history of the show. But for those of us who were there, Different Strokes was something a lot of us had never seen before, and will never forget. I've always been a sucker for fish-out-of-water comedies. You take somebody, put them in a place they don't belong, and hilarity ensues. You mix that with the great straight man versus comedy duo, which has been a staple of comedies since vaudeville days. You put all that together, and you get Perfect Strangers. Perfect Strangers followed the hilarious adventures of Balky Bartokamus, a sheep herder from the fictional island of Mypos, and his distant cousin Larry Appleton, a Wisconsin native living in Chicago. The unlikely duos fish out of water experiences and cultural differences made for some truly memorable moments throughout the series.
Only in America.
The show's success can be attributed to the chemistry between the two lead actors, Bronson Pinchot as Balky and Mark Lynn Baker as Cousin Larry. Their comedic timing and endearing friendship resonated with audiences and helped the show maintain its popularity for 8 seasons. Balky was the lovable doofus with the accent that was fun to mimic, "Don't be ridiculous," and Cousin Larry was the perfect foil, always flustered, but who still loved his cousin. As I said earlier, this two-man team reminded me of some of the famous duos such as Abbott and Costello and Martin and Lewis, if Dean Martin had looked like Mark Lynn Baker anyway. I was always a sucker for the family sitcom. You usually had the cool older brother, the kind of precocious young child, either little sister or little brother. You had the middle child who was usually a nerd or something like that. And Growing Pains was the perfect version of that. That's why it's my number 6 sitcom of the 80s. Growing Pains revolved around the Seaver family and their everyday struggles and triumphs. It took great pains to show that no family was perfect, but that struggle, the growing pains of the family if you will, are what makes a family stronger. For anyone who just knows Kirk Cameron these days, it would be shocking how cool bad boy Mike Seaver was. He was always into a ton of trouble with his buddy Bonus to Bone, but all that never stopped one of the all-time great TV dads, Alan Thicke, from being there for him. Dr. Jason Seaver was the perfect mix of fatherly wisdom and comedic timing. And I'd be remiss to not mention that in the last season, Leonardo DiCaprio was the Cousin Oliver type character, the young blood meant to bring in the younger viewers, which it did not. Number 5 is one of those classic will they or won't they. I know everyone loves Sam and Diane, and that was the couple. Are they going to get together? Are they not going to get together? But for me, as a child of the 80s, the one I cared about the most was Angela and Tony on Who's the Boss. Who's the Boss aired on ABC from 84 to 92. The show followed the life of Tony Michelli, a retired St. Louis Cardinal player who moves to Connecticut with his daughter Samantha. Alyssa Milano, by the way, was one of my first TV crushes. But anyway, Tony moves to Connecticut to become a live-in housekeeper for executive Angela Bauer and her son Jonathan. We just all had to go with it. Why would someone hire a baseball player to be the housekeeper, and why would he move all the way from Brooklyn? Whatever, we just went with it. But the main premise of the show revolved around the role reversal of a man taking care of domestic duties and a woman being the breadwinner in their household, which was a very unique take on the traditional family sitcom. The show was a hit due to the chemistry between the cast members, particularly the relationship between Tony Danza and Judith Light. Danza was the tough-talking Italian-American from Brooklyn who often clashed with the sophisticated Angela, but had an undeniable charm that made him endearing to viewers. Judith Light's portrayal of Angela was nuanced and showcased a strong, independent woman, which was also different from what we saw a lot in the 80s. And of course, who could forget Mona, Angela's super horny mother played by the great Katherine Helmond. And to answer the age-old question, without a doubt, Angela was the boss. Number 4 for me is a show that I actually didn't like when it was on. My mom watched it, she thought it was funny, I just couldn't relate. But the older I get, the funnier it got. And that's why now it's considered a classic by a lot of people, including me, Golden Girls.
Thank you for being a friend.
The Golden Girls followed the lives of 4 older women all living together in Miami. The series was a perfect blend of humor, heart, and relatable characters. One of the main reasons people loved the Golden Girls was the strong bond between the 4 main characters, Dorothy, Blanche, Rose, and Sophia. Their friendship and camaraderie was heartwarming, and the show's portrayal of these strong female friendships demonstrates the importance of having a good support system, no matter your age. Additionally, the show's humor was both witty and heartfelt. The Golden Girls tackled a wide range of topics from aging and family to love and loss, with the perfect balance of comedy and sincerity. The show's ability to make viewers laugh while also addressing important issues has made it a favorite among fans. Finally, it was really groundbreaking. It featured 4 older women as the main characters. This representation was not only a rarity in television back then, it's still kind of rare these days, but it did help pave the way for more diverse and inclusive programming. The show's enduring popularity is a testament to its timeless appeal and the impact it's had on generations of viewers. My number 3 favorite sitcom of the 80s featured my favorite sitcom character of the 80s, Alex P. Keaton. Sit, Ubu, sit! Good dog. It's Family Ties. Family Ties followed the lives of the Keaton family with parents Stephen and Elise and their children Alex, Mallory, Jennifer, and later on Andrew when they felt the need to bring in, a Cousin Oliver type young character to make people keep watching. One of the most notable aspects of the show was the generation gap between the parents and their children. The parents were former hippies and liberal activists, but their children, especially Alex, were more conservative and focused on money and success. It summed up perfectly the differences of the 1960s mindset versus the 1980s. Michael J. Fox became a global superstar playing Alex, as he was lovable in his quest for one day being super wealthy and being as different as his laid-back parents as possible. I'll never forget the episode where Alex lost his virginity. I certainly wasn't familiar with Hugh Hefner, or even really what being a virgin was, but even then I got the humor of the way Alex was dressed and his change in attitude. It was comedy that worked on many levels and still holds up to this day. My number 2 favorite TV show is a classic case of separating the artist from the art. It's hard now to watch The Cosby Show without thinking about Bill Cosby and all the things he's done. But when you separate him from The Cosby Show, you can still look at this as one of the greatest sitcoms of all time, and my number 2 favorite sitcom of the 80s. The Cosby Show followed the life of the Huxtable family, an upper-middle-class African-American family living in Brooklyn. It might not seem like a lot now, but this was a huge moment in TV history. We never had the chance to see a black family on TV who was this relatable to families of all races as the way the Huxtables were. It was a positive portrayal that I really think helped race relations in the United States during the 80s. One of the big reasons to watch The Cosby Show was the amazing cast, led by Bill Cosby as Dr. Heathcliff Huxtable. The chemistry between the actors is fantastic, and the characters were relatable and lovable. Everybody had their own favorite Huxtable child. Mine was Theo. The show also tackled important issues like racism, sexism, and teen pregnancy, but it did it in a lighthearted and humorous way. It also taught me personally not to stand with the fridge open deciding what to eat. Thanks, Theo. And now my number 1 sitcom of the 1980s, Cheers.
Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name.
So why is Cheers my favorite 80s sitcom? First, Cheers had a unique premise that resonated with audiences like me. It was set in a Boston bar, and the show explored the lives of all the bar's staff and patrons. It created a sense of community and camaraderie that made viewers feel like they were part of the gang. The show's ensemble cast, led by Ted Danson and Shelley Long in the early years, had great chemistry and brought their characters to life in a way that made them feel like real people. The writing on Cheers was also top-notch. The show's writers had a knack for crafting hilarious situations and one-liners that still hold up today. Finally, Cheers was a cultural phenomenon that captured the essence of the 1980s. The show's iconic theme song, Where Everybody Knows Your Name, perfectly captured the feeling of belonging that the show embodied. Cheers was a place where people could come together, share their stories, and feel like they were part of something special. Also, Cheers pulled off something that maybe only Van Halen has done. Van Halen lost David Lee Roth and came back with Sammy Hagar, and it was a change that people said would never work, but Van Halen, while different, were possibly even more popular. The same happened as Shelley Long left Cheers, and it seemed the show would lose the chemistry. But when Kirstie Alley came on board as Rebecca, the show soldiered on and was just as funny, if not more. Yes, I was always more of a Rebecca guy than a Diane guy. My all-time favorite episode was Season 8's What is Cliff Clavin? Cliff goes on Jeopardy, and I still maintain he should have won with his answer.
You wrote down, who are 3 people who have never been in my kitchen. No, I'm sorry, that too is wrong. The correct response is, what were the real names of Cary Grant, Tony Curtis, and Joan Crawford?
Be that as it may, Alex,
Those people have never been in my kitchen.
Technically, he was right. And this episode still makes me laugh over 30 years later. These are just a few of the many reasons that Cheers is the #1 sitcom of the 80s. So I hope some of you agree with me, some of you disagree with me. Be sure to leave some comments, tell me what your favorite sitcom was. In 2 weeks, I'm going to revisit this topic again with my top 10 sitcoms of the 70s. But next week, we're going to take a turn with film, and I'm going to rank the movies of Quentin Tarantino. See you then.
Gary Talk TV. Gary Talk TV. Gary